is tricky because every student is different. Different backgrounds, different experiences, and different levels of motivation. Traditional teaching methods can leave them feeling confused, intimidated, left out, unheard, alone, discouraged. Top Hat's dynamic courseware helps you personalize your teaching to resonate with all students. In your lectures, in your assignments, and even in your textbooks. You can create learning moments that matter to your students. With 14 question types, you can drive real-time understanding, encourage active participation, and give every student a voice. The more your students engage with Top Hat, the more insights you get into their performance, giving you more opportunities to adapt your course as the semester unfolds. This helps students build confidence and drive better comprehension. How do we keep students engaged? The answer is right in front of you. Top Hat. Make every mind wonder.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever and whenever you're joining us. I'm thrilled to welcome you to Higher Learnings. I'm Brian Cohen, Chief Academic Officer at Top Hat, and your host for today's webinar. Higher Learnings is a regular webinar series where we engage with the leading thinkers and change makers in higher education. And today we're in for a real treat as we explore sparking joy in any classroom. We want to make our time together as interactive as possible, so keep your fingers warm. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. And a quick bit of housekeeping as you're doing that. We'll be sharing out a recording of today's presentation along with a copy of the slides. Please feel free to continue to make liberal use of the chat to share your experiences, resources, and thoughts as you go along. Everyone really values that contribution. And please use the Q&A feature to pose any questions for our guest, and we'll get to as many of these as time allows. Teaching has always been demanding work, but lately it's felt especially heavy. Many instructors are navigating burnout, extraordinarily rapid technological change, and political tensions, to say nothing of the ongoing challenge of keeping students engaged in their learning. It can feel like we are constantly adapting and always behind, and that sustained pressure can quietly drain the energy and sense of purpose that drew us to the craft of teaching in the first place. And yet the work that we do remains vitally important. Ask almost anyone about someone who had a meaningful impact in their life, and the chances are they're going to mention an educator. I think it's safe to say that there are a few professions that carry that kind of lasting impact. So today we're stepping back to ask, what if the path forward isn't about doing more, but about flourishing more? Drawing on decades of research in positive psychology and human emotion, we'll be exploring how to cultivate engagement, connection, and joy, and how that can strengthen student learning while renewing our own sense of purpose and possibility as educators. Before we introduce our guest speaker, I want to share just a bit about Top Hat and why conversations like this matter so much to us. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Top Hat, our goal is to make active, engaging, and effective teaching easier and more sustainable for you as educators, both inside and outside the classroom. We know that active learning improves outcomes, but it also builds confidence and belonging. When students participate, reflect, and apply ideas together, learning sticks. But bringing active learning into the classroom often takes considerable time and effort. We're trying to change that for you with ACE Lecture Enhancer. With ACE Lecture Enhancer, you can upload your slides and instantly receive AI-powered suggestions for interactive questions and reflection prompts, turning a static lecture into an engaging participatory experience in minutes. Of course, you maintain total control. Of course, active learning shouldn't stop when class ends, and this is where Top Hat content comes in. Many faculty are navigating new affordability mandates and accessibility requirements, including Title II updates, and that can feel urgent and in some cases overwhelming. We don't see these shifts as simple compliance boxes to check. We see them as opportunities to make learning materials more inclusive, more relevant, and more engaging for students. And with ACE Content Enhancer, you can upload course materials, including PDFs, to quickly improve accessibility, personalize examples, adjust tone, and add knowledge checks. making your content more inclusive and engaging. If you'd like to explore how we can support your work, visit tophat.com to learn more. With that, let's introduce our speaker. I am absolutely delighted to welcome back to the stage Flower Darby. Flower is an associate director of Teaching for Learning of the Teaching for Learning Center at the University of Missouri and is the author and co-author of several books, including her latest, The Joyful Online Teacher. She has been a champion for effective teaching practices and advancing equitable learning outcomes throughout her career and is an internationally sought after keynote speaker. Flower, I am so delighted to have you with us today. Welcome to Highlands.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for that warm welcome. Thanks to everybody for joining us here today. I know that everybody is busy, and I don't take it for granted that you're spending this hour with us, whether live now or whether you're watching the recording later. Thank you for being here. We are here today to talk about how we can revitalize ourselves. And I have a lot to share with you. So once again, thanks to the organizing team. Thanks to all of you for the investment that you are making in yourself on behalf of, for the sake of your students. It really, truly warms my heart that you're here today. This is who I am when I'm not working, when I'm not in my little Zoom box here. I have an amazing husband, Tim, who is a strong thought partner. He has worked for over 30 years supporting college faculty teaching with technology. And a lot of what I say comes directly out of his experience as well. We have 3 pretty cool kids. And why am I taking a minute to introduce myself to you? It's because this in itself is a key strategy. Top tip, first takeaway, help your students see a little bit about who you are as a real person outside of your class context. Whether you're teaching in person, especially if you're teaching online, help your students see a little bit more about you. It may not be the pictures of your family's faces. That's a choice that I have made. They're used to it by now. But help your students see your hobbies, your pets, your travel, your personality. And this will enhance their motivation, leading to more engagement, learning with integrity as well. So let's keep going here. Lots to cover in this hour. I'm going to be honest, I have a lot to share with you. I'm going to keep it fast, but we do have little pause breaks to check in with you, and Brad will help facilitate those conversations during those moments. As he mentioned, I do encourage you to use the chat box. I'm not looking at it while I'm presenting, but you all are a tremendous resource for each other, a strong community. And if you're here live, I encourage you to engage in the chat. So I'm delighted, I'm thrilled, I'm so fizzy to announce this new book that's coming out. And I'm going to share the research and the theory with you here because it is about sparking our joy. Now, let me just comment, the book is focused on asynchronous online teaching because I think we could still use some help in this area. So that's what it's focused on. But the research and the theory applies no matter what you're teaching, no matter where you're teaching. So that's why I'm so excited to bring it to you here today. Here's where we're going. I'm going to give a little bit of a scene setting and then explain briefly, very quickly, a psychological theory of well-being, of flourishing. We are going to look at the neuroscience of sparking engagement and joy because theory is fine and it is well tested. But, sometimes we academics can be a skeptical bunch. So I'm going to dive in to the affective neuroscience, what is happening in the brain when we tap into emotions, relationships, and the other things we'll be talking about today. Then we are absolutely going to share several different practical tips, whether you're teaching online or in person. What are some things that you can do tomorrow, next week, or next semester? And again, we'll have plenty of time for questions and conversation as well. So here in our time together, what is one word that you would say? I'm pulling up my chat because I do want to look at it now. What is one word that describes the way you feel about teaching today? If you would like to put your word in the chat box. Grateful, I love it, Jessamine, thank you. Stressful, yes, Stephen, I would agree. Meaningful, 100%, Catherine. Joy and grateful, hopeful, frustrated, burnout, overwhelmed. Wow, what a range. Love, hopeful, exhausting, curious, challenging. Yes, okay. This is what I often find. I appreciate the range of emotions because it is authentic. It is genuine. As Brad said, we are living in some very, very challenging times, overwhelmed with AI cheating. I hear you. And here's what I'm going to share with you today. The way that we feel about anything. Today, we're thinking about teaching, but whether it's a committee task or a challenge that we're navigating in our personal lives, the way we feel impacts directly how much motivation, interest, energy, and enthusiasm we can bring to that task. So if we're here today and we're like, I love teaching, you're naturally, without even having to dredge it up, you're going to have more motivation to dive in. and tackle the challenges that we have in front of us. But if you're here today, and it's absolutely fair if you are and you feel more like this, that will dampen your motivation, your energy. This is the neuroscience I was talking about a minute ago. It will be harder to get started. And here's what we know from emotion science. That is that this is true for all people. It is part of our deep, hard wiring. And here's another little fun fact I want to share with you. I've heard it said before that students look an awful lot like people. And so when I'm talking about what is true for us, it's true for our students as well. I think you're going to see that there's applications of this theory and research in all areas of life, and positive applications. We can make things better is the argument that I am going to share with you today. So once again, we know that there are so many challenges. Brad was talking about Title II, regulations, compliance. Those are words that I don't love when I think about joyful teaching, but they're responsibilities that we have teaching with and without AI, helping students choose integrity, increasing workloads and class sizes. There is so much that we are navigating. So again, my question for us today is, what can we do for ourselves? There's lots of wonderful people talking about what institutions should be doing, what burnout and well-being kinds of approaches we can operationalize, but I'm always thinking about, what can I do? What do I have control over? And that's what I want to invite us to think about today. As autonomous individuals, as really smart, creative, and resourceful people, what can we do? Well, the argument I will make is that we can revitalize ourselves by enjoying our classes. Or, as I heard it said just last week, by keeping the love of the game. I attended a keynote by friends and authors, Regan Garung and Elizabeth Yost Hammer, and they have a brand new book coming out also in April, Teach Like a Champ. They really go all in on a football analogy. And in their keynote, they said, you know what, despite these challenges, we have to stay focused on keeping our love of the game, the teaching game, our students, the meaningfulness of our work. And so I'm going to dive right into the psychological theory of well-being, comes right out of positive psychology. And it is the PERMA theory developed by Martin Seligman and published in 2011. And there are 5 elements. These are like building blocks of well-being. And what the research shows is that when we cultivate experiences in any of these domains, it actually helps us feel happier and predicts increased lifespan, longevity, physical health, and all the good things. So let's talk through very briefly these 5 building blocks. P is for positive emotions. What the research shows is if we're happy, we're feeling better, right? I mean, that's kind of a dumb moment, but it's worth considering how we can build in more happiness into our life because it helps us feel better. And what I really love about PERMA is it works well for people who don't naturally go around feeling happy all the time, right? 50% of the world's population see the glass as half empty. So there are 4 other ways to cultivate well-being. E is for engagement. It's when you get into the flow, that state of complete absorption of the task at hand. You lose all sense of time and self. That makes us feel better. R for relationships, specifically positive relationships, when we feel supported, valued, accepted, when we feel like we belong, when we feel like other people care about us, or even just are willing to have a bit of friendly chit chat at the Starbucks, for example, that helps us to feel better. It brings a little bit of fizz into our day. M is for meaning. I saw this word already in the chat. When we feel that the task at hand is meaningful, purposeful, we are contributing to a higher good, that helps us feel better. And I can think of no more meaningful work than what we are about in higher education. A is for accomplishment. It's winning the game. It's finishing the semester, for example. It's crossing that item off your daily to-do list. Bing, there's a little pop of dopamine. It helps us feel better. And again, what I love about PERMA, it's very flexible. And you can individualize it. You can think, which of these really are important for me? I want to double down. I want to prioritize opportunities that fall within one of these domains. Now, as you can see, positive emotions and positive relationships are highlighted because I conclude after 30 years of teaching in higher education that these are the 2 elements that have the most potential. And I'm going to show you the neuroscience on this for how we can boost our own well-being and, better yet, help our students engage, learn, and thrive as we do so. What it comes down to is My friend and author Susan Rock says is that students are not brains on sticks, and quite frankly, neither are we. We are whole people, and I think in higher ed, we don't attend to this truth as often as we should, and that is what I am about today. So this is the argument that I'm going to be making, that when we enjoy our own teaching and cultivate experiences that are positive and relational, it helps everybody thrive and flourish. What you will see here in a minute from the research is that enjoying ourselves improves optimal functioning in every life domain, including thinking, processing, learning, remembering, recalling. If we're enjoying the task, it's going to go better. It's also true that relating with others, as I just alluded to a minute ago, brings more happiness, more well-being into our lives. And when we make it a point to prioritize enjoyment and rapport building, trust building relationships in our classes, in person and online, students learn better. Let's dig in. Let's look at the science. So first of all, emotions drive our thinking. This was first introduced to me when I read what is a transformative book in my own life and career, The Spark of Learning, Energizing the College Classroom with the Science of Emotion. My now friend and colleague, my mentor, Sarah Rose Kavanaugh, makes the argument that, again, here in higher education, we are not used to thinking about the role that emotions play in cognition. We are under the impression that the pursuit of knowledge is cold, logical, rational. There is no room for emotion here, but actually that's wrong. Based on recent neuroscience, emotions grab our attention, motivate our behaviors, and help us to focus and remember. How does this happen? Well, emotions and cognition are inextricably linked. They are neurobiologically interdependent. You cannot do one without the other. They absolutely deepen learning, as I will show you the evidence for here in a moment, and they 100%, 200% boost achievement. How does this happen? 5 key ways that emotions function. And all of these happen below the surface of our conscious awareness. It's happening deeply inside our mental processes. And so let's look at this. Emotions grab our attention. This is actually related to the fight or flight routine. So I am from Arizona. Hi, Arizona friends who are here today. A few years ago, I was out hiking, and lo and behold, there's a rattlesnake on the trail right next to my foot. Well, what happens physiologically is that the body releases a cascade of stress hormones that prepares the body to fight, to freeze, to flee, to run, right? That happens physiologically before I can even logically articulate what that threat is. Before I can even rationally say, oh, there's a rattlesnake, the body is already reacting to prepare. This is the function of emotions. And when we put emotions to work in our teaching, as I will show you how to do this, it helps us, it taps into this innate inbuilt function that our bodies already have. So if you are worried about students being distracted and who isn't, when we appeal to their emotions, evoke emotional responses, we will automatically hold their attention more effectively. Emotions motivate us. If I decide that I'm going to start a wellness routine and I download an app and there's a 30-day program with exercise, with nutrition, with hydration tips, and on day 1, I do the thing without me even realizing it, it's going to be easier on day 2 to log in and complete that day's activities. But if on day 1, life happens, and it does, then on day 2, without me even being aware of it, it's going to be harder to get started. I will be discouraged, and that will demotivate me to get started the next day. This happens in academic contexts where emotions act like a rudder, actually in all contexts, but I'll give you an example from academia. Emotions act like a rudder that steers our decisions. So let's say that I am your professor, you are a student in my classroom, you raise your hand, ask a question. I'm having a bad day, I'm distracted, I'm hassled, whatever might be happening, and I'm a little bit dismissive, I'm a little bit demeaning. Well, you know what you have learned without even realizing it is that I'm not going to raise my hand in Flower Darby's class again. And then that actually transfers over to other classes and other academic settings as well. But let's flip the scenario. Let's say that I'm a student in your class and I study so hard for the exam and I do all the things that we know helps, and I ace that exam that I was really worried about. Instinctively, I will be more likely to enact those same learning behaviors and strategies the next time, both in your classes and others. So emotions without us, again, even being aware of it, acts like a rudder and steers our decisions. They totally help us focus. They keep us focused on the task at hand when we elicit emotional responses, and they help us remember long term. All you have to do is to think of any vivid memory in your mind, whether it's a wedding day, a graduation, whether it's a period of grief and loss. And I will say, I will know, I will remind you that you have like picture perfect memories from that day or from that event or from that season of your life. Emotions sear things deeply into our memories. We can put this to work. We want our students to remember what they're learning in our classes, and we can harness the power of emotions to help us achieve this. So let's look specifically at how emotions impact academic achievement. I claimed earlier that they boost academic achievement. Let me show you a summary of the extensive body of literature that supports this assertion. This is Reinhard Pecker. He is recently earned the award for the most prolific scholar in the world, if I'm remembering correctly, with over 350 publications, books, chapters, and papers on this work. And what his clear takeaway is that emotions actually impact academic performance a lot more than many of us realize. Then we're going to turn to the work of Barbara Fredrickson, who is the author of the Broaden and Build theory about specifically positive emotions. And again, below the level of conscious awareness, if we are enjoying ourselves, if we are feeling satisfied or content or hopeful, what happens is our perception is actually opened. We are more able to take things in. We are more receptive to new or different perspectives. And when I look at the world that we are living in right now, the societal issues that we are navigating, helping us all to be more receptive, be more open to different viewpoints, I think is highly worth doing. So specifically and quickly, because I want to get to the practical stuff, and we are going to take a quick break here in just a moment. Specifically, how do positive emotions predict academic achievement? Again, it's not just about feeling happy, although clearly I think we can and should cultivate happy times. It's also, again, about feeling hopeful, about being curious, about being really interested in what we're doing, about being proud of what we have accomplished, about being grateful. Any of these positive and pleasant emotions are going to be really effective when we help our students experience them and ourselves. So first of all, enjoyment helps us to feel internally and externally motivated. Now, in higher education, we're pretty good at extrinsic motivation, right? There's grades, there's class completion, there's degree progression, there's graduation. Those are all external motivators, and they're important. But for me, what I've concluded is we really need to tap into the inner drive, because I believe, you can argue with me if you want, but my experience as a 30-year veteran in higher ed, as a mom and as a cat mom, you can't make anybody do anything. That is my takeaway. You can't make students learn. What we want to do is cultivate that inner spark, that inner drive to do the work of learning, to really dive in deeply for themselves. Enjoying the activity or the learning task or the content or the material, when we are enjoying ourselves, it helps us to use more deep and flexible strategies. So from the student perspective, should I create, I was going to say generate, and you could use AI to generate, but as the student, should I make my own study guide, or should I have AI generate one for me? Or should I get together with a group of people IRL and practice and quiz each other? Or should I go to office hours? Whatever the strategy is that's going to be most effective, if I'm enjoying the class, it's going to help me to choose from among, and maybe even employ multiple of those strategies. 100% enjoying ourselves as students helps us to regulate our own learning. That's a whole nother topic for another day. But students who regulate their learning are more successfully academically inclined. So for example, it means setting learning goals, identifying strategies that will help achieve those goals, monitoring their progress, adjusting the goals, or not the goals, adjusting the strategies as needed. Regulating our learning predicts academic success. And when we're enjoying ourselves, that happens more naturally. And best of all, emotion in general and enjoyment in particular, and in this context, it is contagious. It is reciprocal. I'm doing everything I can right now to literally infect you with my joy, my passion for teaching, so that you feel boosted, you feel the fizz. This is what happens with enjoyment. When we are enjoying our time with our students, naturally they will do the same, and vice versa. If they're enjoying our classes, it's going to boost us as well. It's pretty much a win-win that I think just has so much potential. Now, I would be remiss if I talked about the power of emotions without talking about the other end of the emotional spectrum. Negative emotions can reduce motivation, and they can absolutely impede our ability to think. We'll look at that a little bit more in just a few minutes. So we want to be careful. We want to ask ourselves, what can we do to maximize productive and minimize unproductive emotions? Okay, that was a whirlwind tour of the research. Let's check in now. And one question that I have for you, you may have already posed some questions for me, but one question I have for you is what is most interesting? While we're having this conversation, feel free to answer that in the chat. And Brad, what's been happening?
Thank you, Flower. That was a whirlwind tour. So a great question has come in. Among all the emotions that you might seek to cultivate in yourself or elicit in your students, is there a go-to emotional spark that you use in your teaching practice? Do you ensure variety to tap into that emotion or a variety of emotions in some intentional way? So can you talk a little bit about sort of the variety, the palette of emotions that you might draw from and where you land and how you cultivate that in your class?
Yeah, so clearly, based on what the literature shows about positive emotions, that to me is the place to focus limited resources of our own time and energy. Let's literally make classes more fun. But the person who posed the question is, of course, recognizing there is that range of emotions. For example, sobering emotions can be really deeply moving in terms of learning. As an example, if you teach natural disasters, I can guarantee you that your textbook has images of destruction as a result of natural disasters. And that brings it home to students when we're thinking about the climate, the environment, and such. So carefully wielding emotions, mindfully to, again, elicit sort of a sobering response. Curiosity and interest are two that I mentioned very briefly. Those have a huge amount of potential. Relevance, when people remember the meaning and like the in PERMA, when students feel that what they're learning is relevant and meaningful to them, when we can tap into that, that's also a really key opportunity for students to learn more effectively. I hope that helps provide a little more range there.
Absolutely. Uh, let's see. Maybe if you want to comment on what's been interesting or move on, we'll take some more questions in a bit.
Sure. I think in the interest of time, I'll let you all interact with each other and what's interesting and move back into the next set, because again, I have a little bit more to talk about emotions and social connections specifically before we get into some practical tips. So we will be pausing again for this kind of question and conversation. So again, if you're here today, feel free to keep posting your questions in the Q&A. All right, so social connections, do they drive our thinking? This is one that I actually feel a little less confident, but I'm pretty sure that I would hold to this assertion. Again, based on what I'm about to share with you. If you would like to engage me in a discussion on this point, please, I'm here for it. Let's talk about how this might work. But here's where I'm going with this, and it does build on all the research we were just talking about in terms of emotions and specifically fight or flight. So this little section of research is going to be quite a bit shorter, and then we're going to turn our attention to those, okay, what do I do kind of tips and tricks. So here's the way supportive social connections work. First of all, they boost well-being. There is almost a century of research. The longest running study on human development is about 86 years old right now, comes out of Harvard. It's been going continuously for decades, literal decades. And there is one key finding. The key predictor of the good life, of happiness, of contentment, of physical well-being, of longevity, of feeling good physically and mentally, the key predictor is whether and to what extent you have supportive social connections in your life. Again, everything from the chit-chat with the cashier at the grocery store to the deep and meaningful relationships with your loved ones. If you have these in your life, it is a strong predictor of well-being physically and emotionally as well. So feeling connected with other people, feeling supported by them, feeling like you belong in class, all of these boost well-being for sure. 100% enhanced learning. I'll explain this in just a minute. And I will argue foster integrity. When students feel like we care about them as people and learners, that it's not that they are just brains on sticks, they will be more motivated to do the work of learning for themselves. So, what do we know about how social connections specifically affect learning? Well, to answer this question, I'm going to ask you a question. Actually, my question slide isn't there. But really, I probably cut that because, and you will see this coming up in a few minutes, I'm going to encourage us to cut some content in order to make more time for interactions and active learning and trust building. What ends up happening is if I am in a group and I feel excluded, there is a low level activation of the fight or flight response. Now, this actually happens not just about social exclusion or not knowing if I have what it takes to be successful. Maybe I'm a first generation student. I don't know if I have what it takes to go to college. It actually drains cognitive resources at a very low but chronic and persistent level away from the work of learning. This also happens with any anxieties, and we know there's a lot to be anxious about in today's world. It's the same with any food insecurity or anything like that. It drains the cognitive resources the same way that fight or flight does. It's not acute, it's not as dramatic, but there's a low, persistent drain when I am worried about whether I fit in your class, whether I'm supported, whether you care about me, whether I'm just a number in my university. Fight or flight is activated. And again, what that does is it diverts mental energy away from cognition and toward preparing for survival, quite frankly. So the opposite, what happens if I'm in your class, online or in person, and I feel accepted, valued, that I am a contributing member of the community, that it will be noticed if I don't show up for class or if I don't log in for a few days? What happens if I feel like I'm in a trusting environment because you, the instructor, have taken deliberate steps to build trust? We'll talk about those deliberate steps here coming up. Well, what happens, again, it actually frees up cognitive resources. My defenses come down, my guard comes down. I am more able to learn, take in new information, process it, and remember. It also facilitates intellectual risk taking. Now, sometimes this doesn't mean a lot. If you ever thought about it, sometimes it can be really scary to raise a hand and ask a question. You're worried about looking dumb. You're thinking everybody else knows, and why am I the one who has to ask that question? But if I'm in a class community where I feel supported and connected, it'll be easier for me to raise my hand even. And that's a simple example. There's a lot riskier and harder work that has to happen for learning to occur. And both of these things are going to, again, promote more engagement because it's all the good vibes. It's the happy feelings that we spent so much time talking about a minute ago. When I'm enjoying myself, when I'm feeling relaxed and comfortable in your class, again, whether that's online or in person, it will naturally drive me to engage more effectively in the learning behaviors. And it will help students choose to do the work of learning. I'm not saying that it will solve the threat that is being posed by AI right now. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that we have tools at our disposal that we're not really deploying when students care about us and when they feel like we care about them. When they like us, they don't want to let us down. They want to do the work. There's a whole psychology of cheating and what leads to the temptation to cheat. We all do it. Once again, people are all prone to this. But when we feel invested in the work, when we're enjoying it, when we don't want to let our professor or the other students down, we are going to be more likely to engage with integrity. So that was a really quick overview. I think we do have another opportunity to engage here. Brad, has anything else come in? Otherwise, I can comment a little bit on the chat.
Oh my, yes. Quite a few questions have come in here. So there's a lot of interest. I think some of these questions are really, I think, interestingly exploring the subtleties of this practice. So one question, Jason, raises the question of what if you bring all this energy, you have all these strategies to engage students emotionally, and you get, well, as he characterized it, the 1,000-yard stare or the 1,000. You're just not there. Like, what do you do?
I love questions like these, Brad, and I think you and I have worked together enough now that I think you know what I'm about to say, which is Thanks for bringing the reality back into this. I will fully admit and even enjoy the fact that when I come in for an hour, I'm definitely going to give you the razzmatazz, the fizz. Like we are doing this. Everything is going to be great, right? But the reality is that sometimes we get the 1,000-yard stare. So the way that I would answer that in all seriousness is, and I did glimpse just a tiny little bit, even in this moment of people kind of saying sometimes students hold themselves back. Another, I won't say pushback, but another question I sometimes get is like, some people are introverts. Some people, this is not what they need. For example, a professor in an MBA program said, my students are busy working professionals. They're highly motivated. They don't want all this social stuff. So to add nuance, right? And to boost our own well-being at the same time, to protect it, I should say, because it's hard to come in and literally sing and dance and then our students are like, whatever. I've been there too. What I would say is we need to be kind to ourselves and recognize that we are doing everything that we can. We have to recognize our own boundaries and build in opportunities to refresh. For example, I am, in fact, secretly an introvert. You wouldn't know that from when I'm in these opportunities, but you better believe it that when this is done, I'm literally going to lie down on the floor and take a few deep breaths. And then tonight, I'm going to do nothing, right? We need to recover and build in that time and know that about ourselves. But essentially, even when our students are struggling to engage in the ways that we hope they will, I would still argue that first, be kind to yourself. Don't feel like you have to save every student. That's something I have to tell myself. And then do what you can, because that's going to help some. It really will. So
thank you for that. You all, every time you talk, you bring this home to that, that self-care is really a critical component of this. Um, I think connected to that, Madeline has raised the question of, the world does sometimes conspire to make joy impossible. And so what do you do in those moments where you're planning to bring joy into the classroom and it's just not going to happen for a variety of reasons? And I want to connect this to another question, which is where the students themselves are just individually going through it. So they're
yeah,
not in a joyful state and they're not going to be there, right? So how do you both, in real time adjust to or acknowledge this isn't a joyful moment and we're not going to really pretend it's joyful, or in the case of individual students, what's the reaction, the appropriate reaction to acknowledging the fact that they're not going to get there?
I love this set of questions because it does exactly what I argue we need to do, which is to recognize that we are more than brains on sticks. And we collectively, both ourselves as the instructor and our students, are managing a lot. Sarah Kavanaugh, who I quoted earlier, who mentioned her book, she talks about students, especially traditional age students, but I would argue probably all students are dealing with emotional soup, is her phrase. There is just so much going on. Maybe it's anxiety about the job market. Maybe it's roommate issues. Maybe it's romance issues. Maybe it's the dog has to go to the vet and I don't really have the budget for that. There's just so much going on. So recognizing that all of that is happening, I'll tell you what not to do. And this is a hard one lesson that I learned. Um, I don't think today's bio mentioned it, but I have taught many things over the years. And for over 25 years, I taught jazz dance, which is why I feel very authentic with my jazz hands. September 11th, 2001, I was teaching jazz at my lunchtime slot, college jazz class. And I went in hindsight, this was wrong. I went in and went, okay, everybody, we're just gonna do our dancing. And I don't think that was right. In hindsight, I was 20 something, I didn't know. But upon reflection, if there is something happening nationally or on your campus or your local community, right, there is so much that's happening that is heavy in our world right now. I really think it's better to acknowledge it. Likewise, if I come into class and I really am having a bad day for personal reasons, it's better to acknowledge it. It's better to say to the class, hey, I'm struggling with something in my family right now. I'm going to do my best, but I'm struggling today. I just want you to know that, because that models that authenticity for your students. And likewise, there are times when your students are not going to be able to be successful because of life, right? A critically ill parent or any number of things that could be happening. Recognizing that, acknowledging that, being gracious if a student can't complete the class, giving yourself that same grace when needed. These are all, to me, this is all wrapped up in, again, the reality that we live in.
Wonderful. There are many more, but I'm going to give you a chance to carry on, and then we'll come back to this conversation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so, right, we want to know, what are we going to do? I have so many different examples. Again, I'm going to be quick about them. But if you're a note-taking kind of a person, I'd encourage you to jot down some of these. And in my work, almost everything I recommend can be done in person or online. So I'll try to sort of call that out a little bit as we go. But next week, next semester, what can we do to harness the power of emotions and apply emotion science in our classes? Well, first, we're going to look at how we can maximize enjoyment and productive emotions. I use that word specifically to think about those times when you want to invite a more sobering response to motivate action and learning, to, a call to action. We are going to then turn our attention to sort of, okay, what about social connections? What can we do to help students relate and help invite them into our spaces? So clearly, I think we can and should bring our passion. As I already mentioned, I'm doing my very best to share my passion with you. I do love teaching. What can I say? I've loved teaching ever since I was 6-year-old and lined up my dolls in front of the chalkboard and made them go to school. I'm bringing it for you, and I'm deliberately projecting it to the camera with 200% energy. I'm amplifying my presentation skills. I've been accused of yelling with people who are in my vicinity. You love what you teach. I know you do, because you wouldn't be here today if that were not true. You care deeply about your students, and you are passionate about their ability to learn and be successful. I know that for a fact. For me, it is about taking a mindful minute before walking into the classroom, before clicking into Canvas, and reminding ourselves of what it is that is so important, so meaningful to tap into PERMA, why this matters, why our students matter. And we just make that deliberate effort to tap into that before we talk with our students, before we type to our students, before we record a video. Now, here again, there are going to be days that you're not feeling it, and I'm not saying you need to fake it. I'm not saying we need to just fake it entirely, but I am saying that teaching is performative. I would argue even online teaching is performative, and we can choose to bring our best selves into those interactions with our students by taking that mindful moment to say, yeah, this matters. This is important. I love it. I love my students, and I'm going to bring that because it infects your students in the best possible way, with energy and enthusiasm, both of which have been shown to directly enhance learning. Another thing that I've been thinking about lately is the opportunity to foster students' pride and their hope. Look how much you have accomplished. This is the kind of an announcement that I write in my asynchronous online classes. Look how far we've come. I literally wrote this sentence earlier this week in a faculty online course that I'm facilitating. I'm so proud of you. You should be proud of yourselves. Help students recognize their accomplishments, because what that will also do is foster their optimism and their hope and their confidence, all of which are positive emotions, and that they have what it takes to be successful. So call it out. Help students to recognize what they've already accomplished, how they can feel optimistic that when they put in the effort, when they apply the kinds of learning strategies, that when they engage in our active learning exercises, they can be successful. Another way to think about this is to tap into prior knowledge. And because what that's going to do is to foster that, oh yeah, I do know some things about this. I can be optimistic about my future learning. And we did this today. At the very beginning, I said, what is one word that describes how you feel about teaching today? Now, that was many different purposes for asking that question, to introduce the impact of emotions, but also to get you thinking about what you already know about teaching. It's a learning science principle. Getting our students to think about what they already know, experiences they've already had, helps them to feel more confident, and it also helps that learning to stick more effectively, incidentally. But really what I'm talking about here is to evoke emotional responses. And if you think about it, advertisers do this all the time. Marketers do this all the time. The news media, right, are always, sometimes our administration, I don't know, there's always this effort to evoke emotional responses in the news, in the media. Where I live currently in Missouri, I'm pretty close to the farm where the Clydesdale horses are raised that are in the Super Bowl Budweiser commercials. We are subject to emotional appeals all the time, and the reason is they work. They're really effective in getting our attention, in moving us to action. And here's two ways that I think we can do this in our classes. First of all, through the materials that we share. And here's an example. I've shared the work of several different scientists, researchers, and authors with you. Notice that I show their faces. My dear friend and colleague, co-author, Dr. Maisie Mad, is a neuroscientist, teaches biology. And when she quotes research, she has a screenshot, and I love her for it. She's a scientist, but she has a screenshot of the research article. What I am doing deliberately, it's a conscious choice, is to show you the face of the person because I'm trying to elicit an emotional connection with that individual. I have a strong background in teaching English. That's the subject I taught the most. I used to teach Shakespeare. And if you've ever taught Shakespeare or even taken it, you know it can be much more effective to watch a movie version of the play that you're studying because it brings it to life. Think about the materials, the images, the media that you're using to help students connect at that emotional level. It will deepen their understanding. And then the other thing that we can do is to elicit emotions through activities, right? Here's an example from an online class in biology. The professor asked students to go to the local supermarket, take a sample from the shopping cart handle, analyze it for microbes. I mean, ew, gross is an emotion, right? Disgust is an emotion, but also that's very relevant. I use that shopping cart every week. So think about what we're asking our students to do and how it can deepen their learning. Here's an example from statistics. Bungee jumping Barbie is an exercise that asks students to calculate using linear regressions, the amount of cord that is required to jump from a certain height before Barbie goes splat on the rocks. That's funny. That's funny. When we bring in humor, fun, when we create activities that invite an emotional response, when it's just plain fun, then that is going to help our students to learn more effectively as well. And then we can think about curiosity and interest. These are knowledge emotions. What can we do to get students wondering what comes next? Maybe if I were teaching a novel, I might say, okay, we finished up through this chapter. What do you think that character is going to do next? Maybe if I were teaching as a topic in STEM, what do you think the outcome is going to be of this particular equation or this set of circumstances? Ask students questions, get them to predict, evoke curiosity. It will target their cognitive processes. And as I've already mentioned, I do think we can and should have fun. I'm a big fan of learning games for retrieval practice to help students remember what they have learned. If that is your style, there are some wonderful resources out there. There's a relatively recent book called The Educator's Guide to Play and Creative Active Learning Exercises. Learning games, all these kinds of things can help students remember information more effectively. And here's one of my very most favorite ones, a glimpse of my family from many years ago, as you can tell from the earlier pictures that I shared. This is us at Disneyland. I asked my online students to submit one photo. Don't go out and take something new. Look at your photo library, submit one photo, and let's hear about why that's important. It helps me to see my students as people, not as brains on sticks. And you can do this as an individual assignment. You could do this in class when you feel the energy level taking a nosedive, building in these opportunities for interactions. And in fact, we are going to move right into, because that's a nice segue, we're going to move right into, okay, making time. I use the word prioritize specifically. We can create a warm atmosphere when we do what I was talking about earlier, bring our own warmth, our support, our positivity, our encouragement into our classroom presence, into the ways that we write and speak to our online students. We can take a few extra seconds, infuse that written announcement or that discussion reply or that email to our students or that assignment feedback with a little tiny bit more encouragement and support. It will motivate your students to engage and learn. We've talked a little bit about getting to know your students. For example, that share one photo is a nice way to learn who they are outside of your class context. Maybe it's a first day info sheet or a survey that you administer during the first week. Tell me a little bit about yourself, your interests, your hobbies. By the way, I would encourage us to think about what we require from students on a survey like that and what we simply invite, right? We don't want to make students feel stressed out or feel like we're prying or anything, but I would love to hear about your hobbies if you would like to tell me, right? That's the kind of thing that we can and should make time and sometimes even take up a little bit of space in our grading schemes to do. Make it worth points. Students are more likely to do this. Now that's a whole nother topic. Grading is a whole nother topic, but I'm speaking from my experience teaching online. Students are busy and If I really want them to do something, I consider whether it's worth taking a little space in the grading scheme. As I've already mentioned, we can do things that help our students get to know you. Here's an example. There is research that shows that using emojis strategically, selectively, not emoji bombing, but using emojis in online classes like in Canvas or D2L, Blackboard Learn, these kinds of spaces warms up the room. it contextualizes, it helps our neurodivergent students read the tone. So if you're an emoji person, add an emoji or two to your announcement, to your slide. I like to use them on my slides now when I'm teaching in person. But if you're not an emoji person, don't do that. If you like memes, send a meme here and there. But if you're not, don't, right? Just show your personality, tell a story from time to time. It's going to help motivate your students and foster those quick little connections. To do so, to do all of this kind of stuff, and I know this is hard for academics, but I'm going to encourage you to cut some content to make time. And as part of this, I will introduce you to another of my friends and co-authors, Dr. Brian Dewsbury, who published a paper with some colleagues in 2022 that showed that literally removing some content in order to make time to have more active learning, more relationship building, social connections, they were able to show improved learning in the downstream biology class. It was an introductory biology in the 200 level class. Students who had less content but more active learning showed better retention of biology concepts. So it's worth doing. We want to make time for this. It leads to better learning. We can also think about extending academic belonging. So this is a phrase that I got from Lisa Nunn, Dr. Lisa Nunn. And her book is about first year belonging for students on college campuses. And it's about recognizing that, yeah, we want our students to feel like they belong to our college or university, but actually there's another facet. It's academic belonging. Do I have what it takes to be successful in this class? And you can extend active belonging, for example, academic belonging by engaging your students with a quick active learning activity using, I don't know, a polling software or something like that. You can just say, you can normalize it. Hey, this material is complicated, but we are going to work through it together. Let's pause right now and check for understanding. That is a way to extend academic belonging, help students feel that they have what it takes. They can be hopeful. They can do this. Last thing, well, I don't know if it's the last thing. It's one of the last things I will encourage us to do is to be intentional, to structure opportunities to check in with our students and have them check in with each other. So right now, I would love to invite you. I'm almost done. We'll have time for the wrap up and a little bit more Q&A. But right now, I'd love to know, based on this time that we have spent together, what is one image that describes the way you're feeling now about your teaching? Are you feeling like the mountain image? You'll always go for a cat pic. Yes, please do. Put in the chat box. What is one image that shows the way you feel? I love a lot of the dogs, the balloons, the cat. I like the cat because it's kind of nuanced. Is that cat playful or is it hiding and needing to rest? This is an activity that you can use with your students in person or online. Makes a great discussion board activity. Notice there is a range of states that are represented on the slide, and some of them are really kind of nuanced. You can structure things like this. You can take class time, module time, rating space to engage with your students. Because what this does is it shows your students that you care about them as people. And just in case you're at this point of the presentation, you're like, man, that is just really warm and fuzzy. That just feels weird to me. I don't like that. Here's one last thing that I would share with you is this is a way to show pedagogical caring. Pedagogical caring is being intentional in the way you set up your class, the way you write your syllabus, your grading scheme, flexible deadlines, opportunities to retake tests, opportunities to engage actively with new material so that students remember it. It's a way to show pedagogical caring, clear instructions, rubrics, whatever it might be. I care about you as a learner, and I'm going to do what I can to support you in that work. So I am finally at the end of my material for you. I'd love to know what you're thinking you may want to try. And Brad, I'm going to come on back to you for the next section.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Flower. We've got some great questions here, but before we get to them, just a quick wrap up here. I want to let you all know that we are launching a poll. So if you want to learn more about Top Hat and how we support both hearts and minds in the learning process, indicate your interest and we'll be sure to follow up. We've also just launched season 4 of Higher Listenings, which is a podcast of conversations like this with folks like Flower, who will be showing up in our upcoming series. So please check that out if you want to have listen to these conversations. They're incredibly rich and wonderful, and dare I say, joyful experiences. So I hope you'll enjoy that. Coming up next week, we'll be back with designing learning experiences that students want. I'll be joined by Michelle Renda, who is the director of publishing at Wiley & Sons, as we explore the affective side of learning inside and outside the classroom. And you can find details and register for this event by visiting tophat.com/events. I do hope you'll be able to join us for that. Now, back to the questions. First, I see the thanks coming in, Flower, so please join me in thanking Flower. I know some folks have some time limits and have to go, but Flower, this has, as always, been incredible, and I wish we had 30 more minutes. So I want to talk about. I want to bring forward 2 questions, try to put them together. One is from Eliza, who, like me, I think has had the experience of having a plan for how to cultivate some emotional response in the student that just goes crazy. So how do you manage unexpected responses to what you intend to be a certain kind of emotional reaction that diverges in wild ways? Or you have a very large class and it's just 1,000 emotions, not all of them good and positive the way you had intended. How do you think about?
Right.
But I'd like to connect that because this question comes up all the time. Warm and fuzzy sounds like I have to give up, rigor and standards. So how do I maintain accountability without driving students toward a very negative emotional space? So those two kind of maybe combined, and you can talk to those.
Yeah. So, Brad, what was the first one?
The first one was really about the unexpected reaction that you might get emotionally,
Unexpected.
right?
Okay.
So
So
how do
let
you
me,
validate
yeah,
the plan?
thank you. So, again, I think it's important to be transparent and authentic. And that's why I just admitted that actually I got so focused on the second question that I needed a refresher. And that's exactly what I would argue we can and should do with our students. Things are gonna fail. I saw another friend and author here in the audience, Jessica Newhouse, who has a relatively recent book out called Snafu EDU. Love the title. When things go wrong, what do we do? Well, I believe 100% that we be transparent about it. I've been known to say, all right, you know what? We're just going to stop this activity. It's not working. I've even been known to let class go early, right? I think we have to be responsive. But the second part of that is to learn from that. And again, I would argue to be talking with our students about it, to normalize failure. Now, I'm going to acknowledge that this comes with a degree of confidence, teaching experience, and humility, right? To recognize and admit to our students that that did not go the way I intended, but that's exactly what I think we should do, because I think we need to model a willingness to learn from our mistakes in ways that this society needs more than ever before. Regarding the rigor, I love the phrase that another friend and author, Michelle Bakanski-Brock, has sort of popularized. The phrase is that we should be a warm demander. We have our standards high. We do not lower our standards because that will not serve our students well. If we graduate them from our class or the institution, they don't know what they need to know, we have not served them well. We maintain our standards, our high standards, but we are warm, supportive. We build in opportunities to practice, learn from mistakes, repeat tests, revise. That is a warm demander, and I think they go hand in hand.
Wonderful. We've got time for one more question, I think, which is back to the nuance of emotions. There are some studies that suggest that a degree of anxiety is a good thing. So are there some emotions that we want to cultivate with some care and others that we really want to steer away from? You mentioned disgust as a really good example of using that well. So is it contextual? This is a very difficult space, right? So how do you start to step into it if this is a new space to you and try to find the right kinds of emotions that drive students in the right sort of way?
Yeah, really great question. Clearly, emotion science has become a passion of mine. It has changed the trajectory of my career. It has invited more graduate studies, and things are way more nuanced and complex than what I have summarized here for us today. But that's okay. That's important to recognize as well. So, for example, feeling anxious about an upcoming test made me study really hard for your upcoming test, right? So that anxiety can be put to use, and I think we can talk to our students. I was actually talking with a community college accounting major a few months ago, and he was telling me, you know what, when I just can't figure it out, why isn't it working? And then I do figure it out because I keep on working on it. It's so satisfying. And he was really reveling in that. So, I have other examples of more sobering, activities that we just don't really have time to go into today. But here's it in a nutshell. Emotions to me are power tools in our teaching toolkit, and when wielded unwisely, power tools can do a lot of damage. Right. So we want to be mindful. I'm talking to myself. I'm prone to just let's try this. We want to be mindful. We want to be thoughtful. We want to acknowledge if something isn't going the way we hoped. I hope that adds a little tiny bit of the nuance, but I tell you what, there is a little bit more about that in my new book.
Speaking of your new book, again, please join me in thanking Flower. Flower, it's always delightful to spend time with you. Do check out her book. And if you want to hear more from Flower, check out the upcoming podcast in higher listenings. Thank you all for joining us. And Flower, thank you for your passion, your energy, and your expertise with us today. Have a great day, everyone.